After the shock of being kicked out of the company, Gigi was no longer the person everyone had once known. No longer did she hide behind her glamorous outfits, nor did she attend luxurious parties or enjoy the attention of top brands. She was no longer the standout figure in the media. For a long time, Gigi simply watched the world outside, from a distance, in a quiet space that she had created for herself. But as time passed, the pain from the betrayal gradually faded, replaced by a feeling of both frustration and quiet comfort. She knew she couldn't stay idle. No one but herself could change her life. Every morning when Gigi woke up, she felt she had to do something. She started by clearing out old files on her computer, projects she had worked on for her previous company. She had no grand plan, just taking things step by step. The coding, reports, and marketing campaigns she had executed. Every little detail, all came rushing back in her memories. Slowly, she realized that these very tasks, these behind-the-scenes works, were the things she had overlooked during the past years. She thought back to the hours spent working late into the night, making urgent calls because of too many busy projects, and the decisions she made without anyone questioning her. She began to see herself through a different lens. She had been the one who created everything, yet she stood in the shadows when success came. She had to start again from scratch, but this time, Gigi would not do it in a public way. She didn't want anyone from her old company to be involved. She didn't want any more benefits from them. She knew that every success had to begin with inner certainty. So, Gigi embarked on a small project that she had been thinking about for a long time, a marketing strategy aimed at helping new startups. She used the very experiences she had gained throughout her career to create a product that truly had value. She wasn't in a rush for quick results, nor was she racing against time. Every step was carefully thought out. However, things didn't come easily. Just a few weeks after starting her new work, Gigi faced numerous challenges. Her first clients weren't particularly impressed with the innovative ideas she had to offer, even though Gigi believed in her strategic concept. Starting from scratch was never easy. She had to deal with a lack of financial resources, a shortage of support staff, and even comments from her former colleagues. She received several emails from past business partners asking why she had left the company. These questions once again made her feel trapped in the past, in wounds that hadn't healed. But this time, Gigi didn't let her emotions take over. She learned how to face these small challenges, knowing they would never be easy. At the same time, she began reconnecting with some old friends in the industry, people she had once collaborated with, but very few responded. They remained silent, offering no words of comfort, no check-in calls. The feeling of being left behind overwhelmed Gigi once again, but this time, instead of feeling discouraged, she experienced a new sensation, freedom. She realized she didn't need anyone's approval to succeed. She didn't need to be recognized or accepted. Her success would come from the results she created, and she knew that would be the true measure of her worth. As the days passed, Gigi grew stronger. She slowly began to realize that her past mistakes were not failures, but lessons. She started rebuilding her strategy with small improvements. Her first clients began to appear, and though they were few, they were enough to give her hope. Little by little, contracts were signed. Although the road ahead was long and difficult, Gigi no longer felt afraid. She had found her way back to being a leader, a guide. But just when Gigi started to feel things might get better, she received an unexpected notification from the bank. An old loan account of hers was overdue. The feeling of discouragement and disappointment swept over her. She had just begun to regain her confidence and stability, only to face yet another challenge. Her efforts seemed once again to be threatened, like a heavy stone blocking her path. But Gigi was no longer the weak girl she once was. She understood that life would never be without challenges, and the only way to overcome them was to stand up and fight. The anxiety and stress were palpable, but Gigi understood that every trial brought with it an opportunity. She began to motivate herself, searching for new solutions, seeking out people who could help, and above all, she realized that every mistake, every struggle, was just a stepping stone to help her move forward. She knew she had already come a long way, and there was no turning back now after the final weeks passed. Gigi gradually adapted to the new challenges in her work and life. She had begun to regain some sense of faith, with small steps and the first customers gradually recognizing the value in what she did. Gigi knew that, while the road ahead would be long and filled with obstacles, at least she had found a faint light at the end of the tunnel. But life, as it often does, was not that simple. Just when she thought she could finally start to breathe again, a new shock arrived. One morning, as Gigi was preparing for an important meeting with a potential client, she received a text message from an old acquaintance. The message was brief, just a few words. "They're talking about you at Dataloom." Gigi felt a jolt of electricity run through her body. Despite her decision to leave everything behind and never look back at her old company, constantly reminding herself that she didn't need them, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of unease. The people she had worked with, the ones who had stood by her as she built everything, now brought her a sense of discomfort. She wondered if they were still quick to judge her with a critical eye. On instinct, Gigi immediately opened her laptop and searched for any information she could find. All she discovered were rumors about an internal meeting at Dataloom, where people were discussing mistakes in their marketing strategies and changes in campaigns. But one thing Gigi didn't expect to see was that one of the campaigns they were reevaluating was the very strategy she had created, a strategy she had painstakingly built and worked on tirelessly. She felt a rush of emotion when she realized that the work she had done for Dataloom, the strategies she had created, were now being labeled as ineffective, criticized mercilessly. A surge of anger, frustration, and hurt began to swell inside Gigi. But she knew that now was not the time to wallow in self-pity. She had come too far to let that betrayal define her again. She couldn't go back, couldn't allow herself to be a part of that world, the world that had cast her out, the world where she no longer stood. But what she read in those meeting notes made her feel like she had been left in the dark once more. Then, like a trap being set, a phone call came in, ringing relentlessly. On the other end was her former boss, the one who had told her about her firing not long ago. "Gigi, we want you back. There's an opportunity we can't miss." His familiar voice said, "We need your help to revise the marketing strategy, and you're the only one who can help us regain our position." A strange feeling stirred inside Gigi. She knew she couldn't go back to her old company, but she couldn't help but feel a small sense of pride hearing that the very strategies she had built were now being reevaluated. But what could Gigi do? Had she waited until now to answer them? She took a deep breath, gathered her composure, and replied calmly, "I don't need to go back to prove my worth." Her response was so calm that her former boss had nothing more to say. "I have a new direction, a new life, and I don't need anyone's approval to move forward. You will see results from what I create." She hung up, leaned back, and let out a long exhale. She no longer felt like a victim. Instead, she felt like the one in control of her future. Gigi threw all her energy into her work, continuously refining her marketing strategies for the new startup businesses. However, things didn't go as easily as she had hoped. One of the largest partners she had just signed a contract with decided to change their course and canceled the contract without offering any clear explanation. She couldn't help but wonder if the cancellation was connected to the rumors she had heard about her former company. Gigi felt an undeniable link between the contract cancellation and the whispers about Dataloom. This realization only made her more determined. She understood that, no matter how difficult things got, it was the clarity, the calm, and the small but sure steps that would push her forward. But then, something unexpected happened. One evening, while Gigi was reviewing key documents and marketing campaigns in her office, she received an email from a former partner at Dataloom. They wanted her help, but this was in a different way. The people at her old company were not just asking for help with strategy. They genuinely needed her assistance in navigating the increasingly chaotic financial situation they were facing. They knew Gigi was the only one who could help them rebuild from scratch. These requests, though unexpected, made her feel like she was finally being recognized for her worth. But Gigi didn't rush to make a decision. She knew that if she helped them this time, it would prove to everyone that everything she had done in the past was valid, that she could stand firm without needing any help from anyone. As the weeks of the last month passed, Gigi slowly began to adjust to the new challenges in both her work and her life. She was starting to regain some confidence. With her small steps and the first few clients gradually recognizing the value of what she was doing, Gigi knew that while the road ahead was still long and full of obstacles, at least she had found the faintest light at the end of the tunnel. But life wasn't as simple as that, and just as she felt she could finally start to breathe again, a new shock arrived. One morning, as Gigi was preparing for an important meeting with a potential client, she received a message from an old acquaintance. It was brief. "They're talking about you at Dataloom." A jolt of electricity shot through her body. Although she had made the decision to leave everything behind and never look back at her former company, constantly reminding herself that she didn't need them, she couldn't stop herself from feeling uneasy. The people she had worked with, the ones who had stood by her as she built everything, now brought her an uncomfortable feeling. She wondered whether they were still quick to judge her with a critical eye. Acting on instinct, Gigi immediately opened her laptop and began searching for information. All she found were rumors about an internal meeting at Dataloom, where people were discussing mistakes in their marketing strategies and changes in campaigns. But there was one thing Gigi didn't expect. One of the campaigns they were reevaluating was the very strategy she had created, a strategy she had painstakingly built and worked tirelessly on. She felt a rush of anger when she realized that the work she had done for Dataloom, the strategies she had developed, were now being labeled ineffective and ruthlessly criticized. A surge of anger, disappointment, and hurt began to swell inside Gigi. But she knew this wasn't the time for her to dwell in sorrow. She had come too far to let that betrayal hold her back again. She couldn't go back, couldn't allow herself to be a part of that world, the world that had cast her aside, a world where she no longer belonged. But what she read in those meeting notes made her feel like she was once again left in the shadows. Then, as if a trap had been set, a phone call came in, ringing relentlessly. On the other end was her former boss, the one who had informed her of her firing not long ago. "Gigi, we want you back. There's an opportunity we can't miss," the familiar voice said. "We need your help to revise the marketing strategy, and you're the only one who can help us regain our position." A strange feeling stirred within Gigi. She knew she couldn't return to her old company, but she couldn't help feeling a small sense of pride hearing that the strategies she had developed were now being reevaluated. But what could Gigi do? Had she waited until now to answer them, she took a deep breath, composed herself, and calmly replied, "I don't need to go back to prove my worth." Her calm response left her former boss speechless. "I have a new direction, a new life, and I don't need anyone's approval to move forward. You will find results in the work I do." She ended the call, leaned back, and exhaled deeply. She no longer felt like a victim. She felt like the one in control of her own future. Gigi threw all her energy into her work, continuously improving her marketing strategies for new startups. However, things didn't go as easily as she had hoped. One of the largest partners she had just signed a contract with decided to change direction and canceled the contract without offering any explanation. She couldn't help but wonder if the cancellation was connected to the rumors she had heard about her former company. Gigi felt an undeniable connection between the contract cancellation and the whispers about Dataloom. This only strengthened her resolve. She realized that no matter how hard things got, it was the clarity, the calm, and the small but sure steps that would allow her to rise. But then something unexpected happened. One evening, as Gigi was reviewing key documents and marketing campaigns in her office, she received an email from a former partner at Dataloom. They needed her help, but in a different way. The people at her old company weren't just asking for help with strategy. They genuinely needed her assistance in navigating the increasingly chaotic financial situation they were facing. They knew Gigi was the only one who could help them rebuild from scratch. These requests, though unexpected, made her feel as though she was finally being acknowledged for her worth. But Gigi didn't rush to respond. She knew that if she helped them this time, it would prove to everyone that everything she had done in the past was justified, that she could stand firm without needing anyone's assistance. Gigi sat alone in the dark room, only the faint glow from her computer screen illuminating her face. The emails from her old company continued to pile up, but this time, it wasn't just another regular request. The offer had changed. They wanted her back, not just to help, but to lead part of their overall strategy again. Yet, as she read through the message, Gigi felt her heart sink when she realized that she wasn't being invited back with admiration or respect, but rather as a last resort, a desperate need in a crisis. They knew they needed her, but now, everything felt too late. She sat motionless for a while, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk as she searched for answers within herself. The calls, the unnamed projects, the loneliness in her work. All of it had drawn Gigi back to a place she had once been, a place where she had been left behind, a place where she had been betrayed. But then, her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "Gigi, you've overcome the greatest challenges, and you'll know what to do." That simple phrase was like a small flame, but it was strong enough to warm her system and illuminate the faded thoughts in her mind. Perhaps this was the moment she had to do something she hadn't done before, go back and prove her real worth to everyone. She began to devise a plan. It wasn't a plan to return to her old company, but a plan to prove that she could do better, that she could be strong without needing external recognition. Being acknowledged and restored in the eyes of others was no longer her primary goal. She had learned that in an ever-changing world, the most important thing was to recreate herself after every setback. No one's approval was necessary. She would start over and reclaim everything she truly deserved. But after a long night of reflection, Gigi realized that she couldn't avoid facing this challenge, no matter how painful or unjust it had been. If she truly wanted to succeed, she had to confront the people who had betrayed and abandoned her. She couldn't ignore it as if nothing had ever happened. She had fought too hard to get here, and now it was time to acknowledge her own worth. The next day, as Gigi walked into her office, The atmosphere around her felt different. Everything was quiet. The remnants of the past scattered before her eyes like broken shards. The emails, the messages from her old company, were all neatly organized, no longer left in disarray as they once had been. She had started working on her own projects, but by refusing support from her old company, she began to feel more certain that she was moving in the right direction. Gigi began reaching out to bigger clients, those she had worked with before, and no one could deny her creative abilities. The marketing strategies she presented this time not only impressed her partners, but also made them feel compelled to collaborate with her for the long term. She was no longer the Gigi who had been abandoned. She was now showing everyone that she deserved more than what had been done to her. Then, unexpectedly, Gigi received a phone call from her former boss. This time, it wasn't a plea for help, but a new proposal, a completely different kind of offer, Gigi. We really need you. You're the only one who can help us get through this crisis. We know you've come a long way, but we need you to help us recover our marketing strategy. Gigi felt a familiar rush of emotions. This was an opportunity she couldn't refuse, but it was also a trap. Returning to her old company could bring short-term gains, but Gigi understood that only she could decide whether she wanted to go back. These people, no matter how much they needed her, would never see her as an equal partner. They had discarded her when it suited them, and now they wanted her back because of an emergency. These thoughts ran through her mind in a haze. Gigi reached for her keyboard and typed a response. I am not going back to save a company that hasn't trusted me for a long time. I have already and will always create my own value, and I will continue down the path I've chosen. I wish you all the best. She didn't feel anything special when she clicked send. She no longer felt pain when severing old ties. Instead, she felt a sense of peace like never before. Gigi stood up, looking out the office window where the city buzzed outside. For the first time in months, she felt a rush of energy inside her. She didn't need to be recognized by anyone. She had decided to lower the volume on the noise around her and start over, with a completely different path ahead. This time, Gigi wasn't going back to seek revenge. She wouldn't face the people who had betrayed her. Instead, she would prove herself with real results. Gigi stood on the rooftop of the building where she had started everything over, looking out at the vast city with its illusions of lantern lights. A strange sense of peace enveloped her mind, even though the world around her still hummed with energy and activity. She had endured difficult months, but now everything had changed. Gigi was no longer the girl sitting in the shadows, no longer the one left behind. She had risen, rebuilt everything with her own strength and self-expression. There were no calls for help, no apologies. Everything she needed was proof for herself and for the world that, despite being betrayed and pushed down, she could still rise again. Everything was coming back to Gigi. Her marketing efforts were gaining traction, and even her old partners were starting to see the value in what she did. But Gigi didn't allow herself to stop, even though she felt some regret about the early successes. She knew that her journey had only just begun. The strategies she set up not only benefited her, but also created a new wave in the industry. She no longer had to race against anyone, nor did she need to prove herself to anyone. Her success would speak for her. Her old company, Dataloom, still couldn't escape the shadow of the past. The projects Gigi had implemented, though criticized when she left, had now become indispensable to the company's restructuring. The marketing strategies Gigi had painstakingly developed for Dataloom were now being copied by larger competitors. While this wasn't what she had hoped for, it was an undeniable truth. What she had done before had laid the foundation for the company's success, and now no one could ignore her contribution. One morning, while Gigi was attending an important meeting with new partners, she received a call from her former boss at Dataloom. This time, his voice was no longer cold or demanding. Instead, it was full of concern. Gigi, we need your help. We can't move forward without you. These words hit her like lightning, reigniting the feeling of betrayal in her heart. Gigi remembered the days she had been left out, belittled, cast aside by the very company she had poured so much energy into. But now, Gigi was different. She was no longer the person she used to be, someone who would return to please others or seek validation. Instead, she faced the reality her old company, the people who had pushed her out, now needed her help. That didn't make her happy, nor did it hurt her. She had chosen a different path, an independent and self-sufficient one. She wouldn't go back, wouldn't allow herself to be trampled on again. Gigi responded to the email with a composed tone. Thank you for recognizing my value, but I've come too far to turn back. My company is thriving now, and I don't need to return to Dataloom to prove anything. You will need to face the consequences of your own decisions. Not long after, Gigi received another call, this time from one of her old partners at Dataloom, someone she had once been close to. Gigi, we're truly sorry. We didn't realize how much we had missed the mark. We got caught up in the changes and failed to see your contributions. It was a sincere apology, but Gigi no longer felt it meant anything. She didn't need those words. What she needed now was action. Gigi began to see a shift in the industry. The strategies she had set in place, the relationships she had built, were now delivering real value to the companies she worked with. Though she was no longer part of Dataloom, she felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that her achievements were being recognized. Her old competitors, the ones who had once dismissed her, could no longer escape the consequences of their mistakes. They were caught in errors of their own making. Their marketing strategies were no longer as effective, and their financial issues had become increasingly apparent. Meanwhile, Gigi continued to expand her own company, launching a new series of campaigns with more clients. Her new partners were now benefiting from the value she brought to the table, not only in marketing, but Gigi also expanded into other areas, providing creative solutions for startups. Everything was falling into place, and the name Gigi Hadid was becoming a respected brand in the industry. But what pleased Gigi most wasn't the external success, it was the inner satisfaction. She had proven that no one could define her worth except herself. She didn't need to face those who had betrayed her, didn't need to confront them with hatred or bitterness. She just needed to do her work well and let her results speak for themselves. It was her quiet determination that helped her win. Gigi understood that life was not always fair, and not everyone would be there when you needed them the most. But what mattered was always remembering that a person's true value wasn't in what others thought of them, but in what they did and how they overcame difficulties. She had gone from someone abandoned, with nothing, to someone who stood strong on her own 2 feet. She didn't need to return to Dataloom to prove herself. She had already proven enough, not just to them, but to herself.